Hey YouTube, this is the Art of Prepping. Thanks for joining me on part 5 of the traditional bushcraft series. And we're talking about gear and tools that were pretty much used in early bushcraft, and at least here in the United States. And there's a lot of different contrasts as we've gone over, talking about things that used to be used and things that are used now. And so this last part of the series, we're talking about containers. Containers have evolved greatly. And now the early pioneering and bushcraft days, of course, they didn't really call it that. That was just a way of life. If you were out in the bush, that's what it was called. You were just out doing that. They didn't call it camping and surviving. It was every day was survival. Every day was bushcrafting. And so they basically had several different containers. Now, they did have some metal containers, but in terms of their canteens per se, it was more like water bags made of animal hides. And we don't really do that anymore, obviously, in the modern day. So those traditions, not only just because of potential problems in terms of maybe bacteria and other things, we just don't use them. I'm not saying that you couldn't possibly make them useful and safe, because they were pretty much doing it back then and they survived. But in the modern day, let's just say that we've gone toward metal containers and polymers or copolymers, sometimes just straight up just plastic, injected molded plastic. So however you want to call it, there's really two categories. You got the metal and you got synthetics, if you will. And so in terms of like the Nalgene bottles with the polymer and everything, that's obviously a much more recent, type of offering that obviously wasn't around. So, we have to kind of keep that in mind, that the modern day world is so different, and it is compared to how it was. So, what we really have here in the modern day, that we can still keep things very simple. They don't need to be complex. This will probably deviate the most from any of the categories in trying to stay traditional, just because we don't really have the availability of some of those original containers that the early bushcrafters used. But you can definitely go with stainless steel and titanium. Now, I left out aluminum just because there's a lot of studies that show if you overuse aluminum, you can get a buildup of aluminum in the body, and it can be toxic. Of course, you'd probably have to use many years, if not decades. And even the research is a bit conflicting. But anyways, there's just some information that basically indicates, or it's kind of just speculation to some degree, but it kind of points toward there could be things like some neurological problems if you have too much aluminum in your diet. So I just stay completely away from aluminum, and stainless steel is very affordable, just like this Glacier stainless steel bottle cup made by GSI. And this is great. They also make, of course, if you're into this at all, about all kinds of stainless steel canteens. They make them in the water bottle formats like this, that are more spherical, or the traditional GI kind. And this is the clean canteen with the K. This is a 40 ounce and even has the stainless steel inner lid there. So a great way to go. Now, of course, the titanium is even better to some degree. I kind of stop at the stainless steel water bottle. Now, in terms of cups, though, and I have videos on this, I have a really nice Tokes, titanium cups. And they also nest on that water bottle. So if I ever want to change it up and maybe shave about 3 ounces, I can do that. So basically, you can still do bushcraft and share in the tradition, as this series has shown. But you can use modern tools and technology. But it's just a selection of which ones. We're not talking about, going out in the woods with a portable chainsaw and harvesting your firewood that way. No, we're just talking about just using saws and axes, even though they could be a little bit more modern, and typically they are, obviously, because things change and evolve. But in terms of using what we already have a lot just in our toolboxes, in our sheds, in our garages, in our barns, to satisfy really the majority of this, if not all of the things that we've done and shown in these categories. So there's sometimes no need to really go out and buy all these newfangled things. Um, Bushcraft really is based on simple principles of need. And it doesn't take a lot to satisfy our needs as long as we know efficient means to acquire what we need. And so you got to remember, there's the shelter. Shelter is the big one. And then the next one is going to be fire making. The next one is to actually be able to get water, purified, obviously, and store it. And depending on your situation, maybe food could be next, or maybe signaling, or of course, if you're injured, then first aid's up there very high. But every situation's different, so there's no generic way I can just put this out there and it be for you. But generally, we have our needs, and we have to fulfill those needs. And certainly, containers go a long way to fulfilling those needs. And I just personally like titanium containers because they're so light and strong. But for the value, the stainless steel is probably still one of the best. I mean, yes, it can be as much as twice the weight, but the strength is really there. And you're never going to probably wear them out, unless you run them over with a car. But the strength is there. And, you can get these for just a few dollars. I mean, online. It's literally like just a handful of dollars. And so you can put these kits together, even if you don't have any of this that I've shown you in the last few videos in this part, this 5-part system video series here, that I think you can easily go out there and for just a few $100s, save up and do some research and see which what kind of knife, or what kind of saw, or what kind of a container, or what kind of fire starter. You don't really need a lot of money to do all this. I mean, yes, a couple $100s or so could be is a lot for a lot of people, but if you were saving over many months, and and this is your thing that you're into, and you're not, splurging on anything else, I think it's pretty reasonable. Of course, depends on how expensive and how far you want to go with your tools. That you can go very, very far with them, and there's some very, very high-end custom tools. But we're not really talking about that in these videos. We're talking about some basic stuff, and the majority of things, just like this bottle cup, I really do think that if I remember correctly, it was like a little under I think $8 on Amazon. The actual clean canteen, I mean, it was like $20-some, I believe, if that. Like, I can't remember exactly. It's been a while. Some of the knives, like the Moore or the Baco knives, I mean, like between like $7 and $10, for a smaller secondary blade. And primary blades can be more expensive, but if you're looking at that Schrade that we went over, and there's Gerbers and all kinds of, we're not talking that much. We're talking like anywhere from $35 to $50, and you can still get something pretty decent. I mean, actually decent. And so, you might not even need a couple $100s. I'm just throwing that out there, that it's better to do research and just sit on it a little bit, chew on it for a while. Maybe talk to other people that do this, or go out, at least do some camping and say, hey, what works for you? And they say, oh, this works, and you get the handle. Maybe ask, can I just see that saw and see how it feels in my hand? Or you don't mind if I saw this branch and just get a feel for the movement? Or if it's an axe, is it, walk around with maybe your neighbor's axe of the same weight that you're looking to buy. Maybe say, hey, can I just borrow that axe for a couple of days? I'm going to go on a walking trail, and then just say, hey, I'm just going to just walk with it and just see how it feels, because I want to go bushcrafting, and I want to go out for a few days and maybe even travel for like 15 to 20 miles. And what's it going to feel like to have a 2 or 3 pound hand axe, in a pack, or even tethered to your belt? You won't know until you do it. Everybody has their own sensitivity. Some people really don't do well with weight, or especially carrying weight on certain parts of their body. Some people have lots of difficulties putting weight on a belt. Other people don't like things on their back or their shoulders, or they're straining their lower hips. People have sensitivities, and because everybody's different. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses on their body. So you're going to have to just do a lot of testing, and with all of this gear. And, it's really neat to start digging a little bit deeper, though, on the history of bushcraft and where we came from. Especially if you look at other countries, and how sometimes they literally are so much more primitive, in terms of their tradition, even than ours. And I mean, even ours, if you go back to a lot of our ancestors that go back to other countries before we, came over to America, you will see that they had some primitive stuff too. But man, I mean, there's tribal types of bushcraft, if you will, the true bushcraft almost, in a generic sense. But like the Aboriginal people in Australia. I mean, we're talking about some simple stuff. Some spears. Maybe it's sharpened bone on spear, or maybe a rock or something, or flint. Napped into a point like arrows, and a series of long sticks. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a lot to it. I mean, there's a lot of skill involved to make all this work. But there's people, there's indigenous people that literally walk around with all their tools and they can fit in one hand, and they can just walk around like that. They don't have backpacks, slings, all this stuff. They just don't have it. They might wear some type of modified loincloth, or some kind of cloth over their body just to protect them from the sun, or maybe from insects, but that's about it. And then maybe a handful of tools that they walk around with. I mean, it's amazing. It's a really amazing. I mean, the most advanced that I've seen on some of them is just simply a very simple quiver, like sling that just holds their arrows, and then they're walking around with their bow and a few spears and a few sticks. One of them might be a bow for a bow fire. I don't know, but it's very interesting to kind of look at how like a lot of cultures simplify how they do things to get their needs met. And so just like in our country, we're so used to the 3 square meals a day thing, when in reality it's completely ridiculous. It's overkill. We really don't need to eat 3 meals. And of course, most of us go even beyond that. We eat 3 meals and we snack in between, and we're just like stuffed to the brim. And our body is constantly trying to digest food. When you look at a lot of these more, down to earth, tribal people, indigenous people in the jungles, people who don't really interact with a lot of this, 3 meals a day thing. I mean, they're lucky to eat 1 meal a day, and they're very healthy, and they don't have like all this hunger stuff, and it's just like a totally different lifestyle. And so you almost wonder how much of our life is just artificially created just because someone decided this is the standard. And then we all follow suit. We all think we have to have that breakfast, lunch, and dinner, just like we have to have like all these tools for bushcrafting, when maybe what's really lacking is there's a lack of skill and knowledge to actually use things even further than we know how to use them. And that's why there's a lot of people from so-called developed countries. This is the part that I really laugh about. First world countries, they call them, like the United States, or, various countries in Europe. They're supposed to be like developed. But yeah, what the developed people go to these so-called third world countries, underdeveloped, for knowledge. Especially when it comes to like bushcraft, or more advanced survival techniques, or living off the land, or more primitive homesteading, or whatever. It's just hilarious. We're not so advanced. I mean, we have our niches of technology that we could say that we're advanced comparatively, but I can tell you, man, there are so many things that a so-called advanced culture loses in the process of trying to be more advanced. So don't get caught all up in this, everything, that comes out that's new is the best thing ever. I think that most things have already been invented that are worth inventing. And no, I'm not saying that we should not continue to invent new things. Obviously, we need to have lots of new things. And me, I love the new flashlights that are out, they're amazing. Just like I love the new steels that come out, they're being used on knives and other different types of tools. So I'm 100% behind technology, but in terms of form and everything, yes, there's always a tweaking of it, but it's just like you can't reinvent the wheel. Like, even though that's a cliche, if you really think about what that really says, the wheel is the wheel. There's really no way to perfect that. I mean, it's just a circle is a circle, and and that's the limitation on that particular thought. It's just kind of like. the dome, for example, or an arch. It's like that's the strongest way to build. It's just that's it. It's inherently stronger than anything else that's non-dome or arched. That's just like how the mechanics of this physical world is. And sometimes it's the same thing, that there are some ways that are just more simple than others to make a fire, at least with simple, tools. Some ways are just more simple to process wood, and so forth and so forth. And let's just be mindful not to overcomplicate things, to sometimes look back to our history, the traditional ways, and maybe rediscover what's already been discovered. As always, thanks for your support, for watching the videos. Hope you enjoyed this 5-part series. Hit the like button if you liked it, and leave a little comment saying, hey, it was cool, or if it wasn't. And if there's things that you would like me to cover in the future, please put that in the comments as well. Everyone be safe and enjoy fall. It's a beautiful time of the year. And just remember, winters are right around the corner. So prepare, prepare, prepare.